In my opinion, nothing is more important than managing the people's money, and it would be an understatement to say that the Jamaican people are being lied to about their cash. For those of you who are unaware of what is going on in Jamaica, here is some of the PM's propaganda about the economy.
But because we have built the economy on strong footing, putting in the necessary fiscal buffers, making sure that we manage expenditure, we have been able to reduce our debt servicing, so that we have more money to spend on the things that matter to you. And you know when your economy is starting to do well, when unemployment is going down. You know when your economy is doing well, when inflation is going down. You know your economy is doing well when your reserves are going up. You know your economy is doing well when your dollar is trading very stable. You know your economy is doing well when your debt is going down.
Well, from his bluster, you would believe that his government is doing a magnificent job. He always brags that the debt is falling. However, during the March budget debate, the Minister of Finance made a shocking revelation that the PM's claim is untrue. Take a listen.
No, just a point of fact, Madam Speaker. The debt ratio is not the absolute level of debt. Okay? So it's not a matter that we are paying down the debt. Right? Madam Speaker, the absolute level of debt in Jamaica stayed relatively constant for the past several years, hovering around 2 trillion to 2.2 trillion. It's not that we're paying down the debt in a literal sense. We're managing the government's finances so that we don't materially increase the size of debt. While we grow the economy, so the debt does not become a threat to the economy. And we grow the economy so that the ratio between the size of the debt and the size of the economy gets lower each year. So the fallacy, the debt was 2.1 trillion in 22-23. In 23-24, it will be 2.2 trillion. It's not that we're paying it down. It's actually going up, but we're doing it in a way that is sustainable. Right?
So, in a nutshell, we are being lied to. However, Clark's statements are extremely worrying. He said they're not paying down the debt, but they're managing our finances so as not to increase the debt, and they're doing this in a sustainable manner. He said the debt has stayed relatively constant for the past several years, hovering in the range of 2 to 2.2 trillion Jamaican dollars. Here is a table of debt figures from his presentation. And this is the 11-year period since the IMF agreement in 2013. As you can see, the debt has been relatively constant, as he said, and is currently 2.2 trillion. However, if you are servicing debt and it is not going down, there must be something terribly, terribly wrong. And the debt should be falling because every year the Ministry of Finance spends hundreds of billions of dollars servicing it. There are two components to debt servicing: interest payments and principal repayments. Repayments are supposed to reduce the debt, and in financial year 2019-20, the repayment was 138 billion. So you would automatically assume that the debt would have decreased that year. Now, the minister, he claims that this management is sustainable. So how much is being spent servicing a debt that has remained constant? Here is a table of the annual servicing figures since 2013. Over 3,000 billion or over 3 trillion Jamaican dollars has been spent. So under the supervision of the rescuing IMF, the Jamaica Labour Party and the People's National Party have spent over $3 trillion servicing a $2 trillion debt. And around 2 trillion of the 3 trillion spent was on debt reduction, but the debt increased by 10%. This is the opposite of sustainable. It is catastrophic. I don't see how any debt can be repaid under such circumstances, so for me, it stinks of gross mismanagement, corruption and exploitation. Greedy financiers getting extremely rich at our considerable expense. but the minister is very proud of their achievements.
Madam Speaker, we are proud of our commitment and our successful effort so far to reduce the debt ratio to the lowest level, Madam Speaker, in 30 years, and by next year, the lowest level in 50 years, Madam Speaker.
You can only but marvel. In a previous video, I explained why I believe that the debt to GDP ratio is a scam, but recent data from the World Bank are numbers wildly different from those provided by the Ministry of Finance. Here is the graph of ratios that Clark presented to Parliament. However, in this World Bank table of ratios, the year we are told that the ratio was at a high of around 150%, it was actually at its lowest, and during the following 9 years, the ratio did not fall below 100% again. This should be headline news because the data questioned the validity of the IMF austerity program. But it was not news because Jamaica is a banana republic devoid of real journalism, a country where the people are deliberately kept ignorant and misinformed, and those who know better are quiet. Back in 2013, according to the World Bank, the ratio was only 93%, not 150%. Also, the debt was just 12.9 billion US, or a massive 7.1 billion lower than the Ministry of Finance figure. And at the end of 2022, the World Bank ratio was 106%, not 80%. And the debt figure of 17.6 billion US was 3.1 billion higher than the Ministry of Finance figure. There is absolutely nothing to be proud of. Nothing. The people are being taken for a ride. The PM and the Minister claim that we have record low unemployment of 4.2%.
And you know when your economy is starting to do well, when unemployment is going down. We are now seeing the lowest level unemployment in the history of Jamaica. More Jamaicans have work now than any time before in our history.
Well, with so many people working, you would expect a thriving economy, and the tax revenues raised should be sufficient to finance the current $1.34 trillion budget, which is around 8.6 billion US. It sounds like a big figure, but when one considers that the 2004-2005 Education Task Force recommended that the budget for education needed to be over 4 billion US, you can see that it is woefully inadequate. So, it is fair to expect that the 1.34 trillion should be covered by taxes, but that's not the case.
Government is planning to spend $1.3 trillion for the financial year 2024-2025 that starts on April 1. That's a 19% increase over the $1.1 trillion that has been approved for the current fiscal year. Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark tabled the proposed budget in Parliament on Thursday. He said the budget will be financed through $1 trillion in tax revenues and grants and $300 billion from other sources such as loans.
So, after all that noise about sustainability and great management, over 20% of the budget, or around 300 billion, needs to be borrowed. Not only that, but we were told debt servicing costs had gone down.
To reduce our debt servicing.
Well, last year it was 280 billion, and this year is a whopping 75% bigger. That is 491 billion, or 3.2 billion US, is set aside for loan sharks. Now here is a possible scenario for how the 491 billion will be financed. The finance minister could use the 300 billion that he has to borrow, which equates to the borrowed money going straight back into the pockets of lenders. So he's actually borrowing to repay debt and calls that sustainable. He reckons he'll collect 159 billion from personal income tax. So if you pay income tax, look at your payslip. All of the tax will go into the pockets of unscrupulous financiers. He reckons he'll collect 29 billion from travel and room tax. Therefore, over half of the direct tax from tourism will go into the pockets of moneylenders. He reckons he'll collect 3 billion from telephone call tax. So every time you make a call that is taxed, that money goes into the pockets of the greedy. Adding those revenues together, that is the $300 billion loan, $159 billion from income tax, $29 billion from room tax, and $3 billion telephone tax, that gives you $491 billion. So the economy is definitely booming for loan sharks. The JLP and the PNP have spent over $3 trillion on a debt that is going up, so it will remain boom time for lenders for the foreseeable future, and some of the lenders are Jamaican. For me, it is crystal clear that it is impossible for Jamaica to progress with the current fiscal arrangement. I believe it is utter madness to sit back and allow this to continue. This is why we don't have infrastructure, education and healthcare, etc. If we want real change, we must have a movement to get independents like myself into Parliament. Doing nothing is not an option. We need to unite, and you can start by signing and circulating a petition in the description. It will start the process for accountability because we urgently need a forensic audit of the debt.